All right. So,
Let's do this.
are we going to wait for your beer?
No, we're going to start.
We're just going to go? Okay. So, we're going to keep it pretty casual. Mike Novogratz, thank you for coming to Korea. Right. I think it's your first time in Korea. So, before we dive too deeply in, can you give us some background?
So, not my first time in Korea. I was here in 1992 for my bachelor party in Itaewon. Bachelor party in Itaewon, yes. Some of you guys weren't even born then.
Yes.
And then I came back a lot. I was a major currency trader when I was at Goldman Sachs, and I traded a lot of Korean won right through the financial crisis in '97. And then at Fortress, at one point I was, I think, the largest Kospi trader in the world. I would stay up at night, every night, because it was perfect hours, 12-hour difference, and I would buy and sell Kospi, almost like an addict, you know, buy, sell, buy, sell. And so between Kospi and the won, I have a lot of, and I was here 5 years ago. I gave a speech with the finance minister.
Oh.
And he was spectacularly, I forgot his name, whoever was the finance minister 5 years ago was spectacularly talented, very smart, a nuanced speech, really on the history of the future of the labor market in Korea. And I was like, man, we need more of those guys in public service.
Right.
So, but that's the last time I was in Korea 5 years ago. But this is the first time I've ever seen the blockchain and crypto phenomena.
Right.
That is Korea. So it's been pretty exciting.
Super cool. Can we dial back though? Like, how did you first get into kind of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies?
So I was a macro trader, and I was working at Fortress, and I got a phone call from my partner, who was a complete non-technical Luddite. He was a distressed debt investor. He used to say he was the world's best garbage man. And he had moved his family and our business, part of our business, to San Francisco because his wife lived there, and she told him if she had to stay in New York any longer, she would divorce him. I think he should have gotten divorced. But he moved his whole family to San Francisco. That was a joke. And in his YPO group that he joined, there was a guy named Wences Casares.
What's YPO, by the way?
YPO is Young Presidents.
Got it. Okay.
So he joined this group, and one of the members was a guy named Wences Casares. And Wences is probably responsible for getting more people into Bitcoin than anybody else. He has a company called Zappo, which is a custody company, which we were day one investors in. And so Wences was telling about this, and Pete called me up and said, can you look into Bitcoin? And macro guys are very fast, and I Googled, and I started thinking about this, and it had lots of things that would be a perfect speculative asset. It was this really cool new technology in cryptography.
Right.
At that point, it was about 2012, and we were right in the middle of the European financial crisis. And so we had the US financial crisis, the global financial crisis in '08, and now in the European financial crisis, and all the central banks were cutting interest rates to zero. And people thought that was crazy. It was going to hyperinflate the world away. Really smart people thought it was going to create hyperinflation, not just crazy people. And I thought, we have people that don't trust central banks. We have the cypherpunks that don't trust anyone anyway, you have libertarians that love this, guys that want to live off the grid, and most importantly, the Chinese had started buying. And I was like, this is a perfect speculative bubble. And so we bought a bunch. And
this is before Galaxy.
this was when I was at Fortress. This is 2012. Bitcoin was trading about $95. And we decided as a company not to do it as a company, to do it individually and not to talk about it. And because I have a big mouth, I was at a small conference, and somebody had asked me about frontier currencies.
Yeah.
They were asking about like the African currencies or Vietnam Dong. And I said, screw those frontier currencies. If you want a real frontier currency, you should buy Bitcoin for these 4 reasons. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you know what? It's going to go from 100 to 1,000. And the next day, I was on the cover of the FT. The next day, Fortress Novogratz says Bitcoin to go to 1,000. And ever since then, I've been like the Forrest Gump of Bitcoin.
Right.
You know, people call me and ask me what I think. And to be fair, it went from 100 to 1,000.
You did?
And we had bought a lot of. We were rich guys already, and so we bought not even 1% of our net worth. but it was still a lot notionally.
Right.
And so when it went up. It was a whole lot of money. And then, of course, it went back down. But that's how I got started. And one of the things I think is important is whenever you buy something and you start making money, you pay a lot more attention. And when you're forced to get on stage and speak, so I got invited to Oxford to speak at Oxford, and that was pretty cool. Oxford, it's the oldest debating society in the world. And so then you're like, shit, I better understand how this works. So I was like reading papers, and I remember Mark Andreessen had made a speech, and I kind of hacked his speech a little bit. I didn't feel bad because he had hacked his speech from a Stanford professor, a woman named Susan Athey. But that's how I started getting into it.
Got it, okay. Where did you go from there? I mean, there's some time between Fortress and Galaxy.
Yeah, so if you remember, Bitcoin went up, went back down to 400, and then it kind of went to 200, and it stayed there, dead for about 18 months, the dead time. And luckily, I had other stuff to do, so I wasn't really paying attention. We had funded a company called Pantera. Dan Moorhead was a college friend, and I had funded his hedge fund once before. So I called him, I said, look into this. And 2 weeks later, to his credit, he called back and said, this is going to change the world. And one of the reasons Pete and I bought as much Bitcoin as we did is because Dan was buying it for us. And we said, well, how much are you buying? He said, I'm buying this much. I was like, geez, I got to buy at least as much as him because we're a lot richer. And so we didn't want to be embarrassed. And so we probably bought 3 to 4 times more than we would have just because Moorhead bought so much. Right. And so the three of us really were a partnership. And so anyways, when it went dead, Dan was working on this company. We weren't paying attention. And I left Fortress at the end of 2015. Mm-hmm. Yeah, November of 2015. And, after brushing off the dirt and the glass, I said, I better look at my portfolio. Now I don't have a job. My wife spends a lot of money. And I'm like, how am I going to pay for this big lifestyle? Right. I give money to charity, and I got very nervous. I was like, cancel the flowers. And I had a friend, another classmate named Joe Lubin, who runs a company called Consensus.
He's from Princeton as well?
He's Princeton 87 as well. Wow. Me, Moorhead, and Lubin are all classmates.
Wow.
Okay. And Joe was my roommate.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, my roommate. And his story is an interesting story as is. But when I had gone on TV to talk about Bitcoin, I got a Facebook message from Joe Lubin. I hadn't seen him in like 18 months. And he was in Barbados with this beautiful girl who was a singer. And he was coding this on the Ethereum project. And he was telling me well, Bitcoin is good, but there's going to be something that's great called Ethereum. This was before Ethereum even existed. I was like, yeah. And so when I left Fortress, I thought, who knows more about this stuff than Joe Lubin? So I called up. He had moved to Brooklyn. And I went there and I thought, find Joe. It'll probably be him, a dog, a computer, and maybe a cat. And I walked in and there was 25 people. Smart, young computer guys, older guys that had been derivative salesmen and lawyers. And they had TVs, and there were people in Israel and Argentina that were calling in. And I was like, how did Joe Lubin do this? He had never really had a business. He had always been kind of a drifter. One job, another job. Always very smart and always very nice, a great friend. But had never really been, a business guy. And now he had this beehive, a lot like the Hashed office. Good energy, lots of people walking around. Not nearly as nice. It was kind of a shithole of a building. A very funny neighborhood. I'm like, whoa, this building looks like it's going to fall down. They're still there at Consensus, same building. They like it. And so I looked and I was like, there's something more to this. This is not just a financial speculation. This is a revolution. And it's a revolution of people that feel like the world was unfair, that there's a better way to set things up, this decentralized version of the world. Web 3.0 could be a lot better than Web 2.0. And they were plotting this revolution. And so I immediately said to Joe, hey, what does it cost you to run this business? And he told me what it cost him to run this business. And I said, well, if I give you $10 million, pretty rich, I'll buy a piece of your business. And Joe said, well, that's a great idea. That would be interesting. And I said, well, can you write what your business is on a piece of paper? So the real purist in this world, the decentralized ownership, decentralized everything, distributed trust, distributed ownership. So he started writing down, and to be honest, he said, this is a new company. It's going to take me about a month. I always think a CEO should be able to write down their business right on one piece of paper. Really simple. Right. And he said, it's not as simple as that. I own a piece of this, and this guy owns this. And, they were really setting up. He really believes in the decentralized world. Mm-hmm. And so their company runs decentralized. And I was lucky enough to have been a macro trader my whole life. And you always learn this lesson. If you have this idea that something's going to work and you say, okay, I'll fly to Indonesia to do due diligence on the Indonesian rupiah. By the time you go there and do all the due diligence, the damn thing's already moved. Right. And so I thought, when you smell it, when it feels right, buy something. Right. Because if you have to pay a higher price, then you at least have the low price. And so I said, I'm not leaving until I buy some Ethereum. And Joe wasn't going to sell me his Ethereum. He was holding on. He's like, I've worked too hard. I'm keeping mine. And in New York, it wasn't legal if you didn't have a bit license to buy or sell Ethereum. And the only legal exchange was Gemini, and they weren't doing Ethereum yet. So I was like, and the guys there were, just set up an account in New Jersey. And I learned if you're a rich guy, you don't break the rules. Right? So I was like, but I could buy OTC. And so I ended up calling Vitalik, who I had met once, didn't really know him. Hey, and I bought Ethereum from Vitalik.
You OTC'ed ETH from Vitalik?
At 96 cents. I'm not going to tell you how much, but it's not an insignificant amount.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I started buying more OTC in the market. And so now I owned a lot of Ethereum at, call it $1.50, a lot. And, I went away to India. I came back. It was trading at, 2 weeks later, it's trading at 5 or 6. It started going up. And this is now March. And I realized Joe no longer needed my money because he owned a lot of Ethereum. And you don't want to arbitrage your friend. And I was thinking, how would I contribute? We have a very similar, he has a much more technical skill set than me, but he's a good leader, he's a good speaker. And so I said, I'm going to just cheer for him. And I'm just going to be a private investor. And I hired a young kid, a guy named John West, who was great. And he actually pretty much lived at the consensus office. I said, you can go live with those guys. And so it was fun to get a bird's eye view of the beginning. Even the Dow hack, I was on the conference calls listening as the old wise guy, just thinking. And trading. I just have trading in my blood, and so I'd buy and sell, and Ether went to 20, I sold a bunch and bought it back at 8. And it wasn't until a year later, about April, Ether was 40, when it really started to move, that I started thinking about doing a bigger business than just being an investor. Right. And that was for a couple reasons. I had one conversation actually with a brilliant guy, and he was telling me, but he had these investors and these investors, and I was like, wait a minute, I got jealous. I was like, wait a minute, I know all those guys. I should get those. And so that got me going. And then I did an interview. Joe had asked me, do you a favor, will you come be on a panel? He's always done me lots of favors, I'll do him a favor. And on the panel, again, the same thing happened. I didn't know the press was there. And I said, hey, I have 20% of my net worth. And that went on from Nigeria to Japan to all over.
It's on Wikipedia.
It got picked up all over the place. And I was like, oh, so now everyone knows I was doing crypto. And then Bloomberg asked me to do an interview, and Eric Shacker and I did this 40-minute interview. And it got watched by thousands and thousands of people. And I started thinking, this is such an interesting space. And I'm 52, I have another chapter or two left in life. Being a private investor is fun, but you're not in the middle of something. And so to be in the middle of something is really rewarding if you think you have something to offer. And you can't do it as a family office. You can hire one or two smart people. You can't hire an army, right? To hire an army, you've got to make them feel like it's their company. And so we had this idea that we'd build a company, and my brother named it Galaxy because we love Star Wars. Yeah. Also, anything Star Wars goes well in my family. But also we wanted to be in the center, this exploding center of this new world. And since then we've been running, not as fast as this guy, but very, very fast. Hiring, investing, and talking a lot about it. I talk so much I sometimes get bored of hearing myself.
No, I didn't know any of this background story. This is actually really good. Now, what about explaining Galaxy in a nutshell?
So we're trying to build a merchant bank or an investment bank. And so the primary purpose of an investment bank is to raise capital for other people. We want to be the credentializer. And so if it's a big company that needs to raise 200 million in an ICO or an SCO, we want to be the bank that, vets them, that helps them structure their deal, and then helps them place it. I think in order to raise money, certainly if you have money, you better be willing to invest. And so side by side with the investment banking arm is a direct investment arm. Our best business so far is direct investing because we've been doing it a long time. And so that's in infrastructure plays, in wallets, in custody, in ICOs, in protocol, and in dApps, and in funds, if we think we should sponsor a fund. So we have a big, broad portfolio, and we're building a banking business. I used to be such an active trader that I was one of the biggest customers I remember I was Circle's largest customer. And I said, wait a minute, why am I paying all the bid-ask spread? And so we're building an OTC trading business and an electronic trading business to compete with Cumberland and Circle and Octagon and all those guys. And then we've got an asset management business, which is really only going to be for things that are very scalable that we don't want to put on our balance sheet. And so we have a beta product with Bloomberg, which is the Bloomberg Galaxy Crypto Index, which is the 10 biggest coins capped at 30%, rebalanced monthly. It's a wonderful index product, mostly because Bloomberg is doing it. Bloomberg has 300 people in their index group. They are wildly professional, and so they scrape the data, they make sure the prices are real, they print the index. And it was our name, and we helped consult, but they do all the work. And that's good because people then trust we're not. So for Coinbase to have its own index, it's like, wait a minute, you're setting the prices on your own index. That doesn't really fly institutionally. And so those are the four businesses. Two of them are strong because we've been doing it for a long time, our investment business and our proprietary trading. Sell coins, buy coins, sell coins, buy coins. And the rest of them are works in progress. Building businesses is hard. It takes time. You got to get the regulatory framework right. You got to hire the right people, and so. But we're pretty excited. We have four business principles, which I think are interesting. One is be invested. This is a secular bull market, and so being invested I think is important. Two is be diversified. Bitcoin maximalist, the wrong way to think about this. I tell this story in 1999, about a month before the collapse. My mother called me up, and I grew up a middle-class kid. Now I had become a partner at Goldman Sachs. I was very proud of myself, and she was like, all my neighbors bought Amazon, and I don't own any Amazon. She was like, how could you be so stupid? You didn't tell me to buy Amazon. And I was like, her neighbors bought like $100 of Amazon. Right. And I was like, Mom. And anyway, of course, the market crashed. It was in my head, though, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to miss the Chinese internet. And I had a friend who brought me a guy. He was a white guy with very thick glasses. And he had a company called madeforchina.com. And I gave him almost all my liquidity. I was like, this is my Chinese internet bet. If it works, I'm going to be rich. And of course, it went to zero. And I look back, if I had just made 10 bets, right. Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba, like there were not that. I worked at Goldman Sachs. They saw everything. I would have just done so much better. I threw the dart at the only zero on the board, And so when I started crypto, I was like, we're not going to be so arrogant to think we know what blockchain is going to work.
Be diversified.
Be diversified. Third, be in the center. Be in the center for lots of reasons. So you see all the right deal flow and you get to get in at a good price. So you see the information flow. This business, more than almost any, helps to be in the center. Why I flew to Korea. it's a long flight, is I met this guy, seems to be in the center out here. And I said, okay, if we can piggyback off his connection, I'll understand this business much quicker. We're doing the same all over the world, so be in the center. And the last piece is a little different than most people, is be disciplined. What do you mean disciplined? The laws of markets didn't change just because it's crypto. You know, and so a lot of people, well, this is a whole new, no, it's market still. And so when things get to stupid prices, we sell them. And I don't regret it. You know, when we realize, hey, we're in a crummy investment, we get out of it. And so use the same trading rules that I've used my whole life to keep the portfolio management moving in the right direction. And so like this idea of HODL, you know, there are some investments that you want to make that you're going to hold for a long period of time, and there are others it makes no sense to HODL. If some protocol or DApp starts trading at a stupid valuation where you're never going to be able to grow into it, sell it or get shorted. And so, you know, when XRP traded to $3.20, I looked at, they have 60 billion coins on their balance sheet, 60 billion times 3, $180 billion. It made them the 7th biggest company in the world, or 10th biggest company in the world. And I was like, that's really stupid. And I actually said that on Twitter. And I sold a lot of XRP, short.
And he shorted it, right?
And I shorted it. I like the company. I own a very big chunk of Ripple equity. Right. But the token got to a stupid price.
Do you know why? It's the Korean market.
Yes, because the Koreans were all buying it. Right. One of the reasons the regulators in the United States, in Japan, and in Korea got involved is because you had a lot of new players to markets that didn't really understand what they were doing. They didn't understand be disciplined, that the law of gravity works. And so the regulators are there to protect the little guy. This is where my joke fell flat. Right. And I think they're doing a good job of kind of resetting the rule. And we'll see what comes out of it, but I don't think we'll see another year like 2017, where things go that insane. I do think once institutions start buying, you'll see the same phenomenon of FOMO. Mm-hmm. Institutions will have the same fear of missing out that retail did. But the infrastructure around the space will be, the regulation will be more mature, the risk management systems will be more mature, the valuation metrics. No one even understood how tokens worked. Right. I bought some ICOs, and embarrassingly enough, I didn't even understand the token economics. Someone told me something and it turned out not to be the right one. Right. And so I think it's very important now to really understand token economics, how it works, and to use your businessman's head. Forget crypto, just businessman. Hey, does that make any sense? And so I'm very bullish on the maturity of the industry.
So we're running out of time. I have one kind of final question that everyone always asks. Right? You mentioned, I think, Bitcoin going to 50K end of the year. Are you still bullish?
I didn't say 50K. So what I said is we're going to have a hard time taking out 10K until we get an institutional custody solution. And if we get an institutional custody solution, and what I mean by that is a name that institutional investors trust, Goldman Sachs or State Street or Sumitomo Bank or Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, something that they trust. Then I think we can retest the highs. Until then, I think, you know, I think we've put in the lows for the year. Yeah. But I don't see an explosion up because there's no new buyers, right? Retail got hurt. I do think Japan is going to turn back on in about 2 months, and so you'll see some excitement there that will push the price some. But there's a lot of bad longs trapped above 10,000. And so you're going to go to 10,000, it's going to hit a ceiling like, and come back down. And so you really need the institutions to take that next leg. But I think within 12 months, we'll have that, and we'll retest that 20,000 high. And then when you break that, then that's when the institutions come in, then it's a whole new game.
Can you comment on any other coin and/or tokens that you were quite bullish on?
Sure. I like EOS token. I think the blockchain just started on EOS. It's about a month old. Blockchains are governments. They're constitutions in lots of ways, and it wasn't perfect when it started, and there's changes being made. And I think over the next few months, you'll see that community settle into something that feels right and vibrant. And it's going to operate much faster than all the rest of the blockchains. And so part of the thesis there is some portion of the community is going to choose convenience over the purists, really more nodes, right? EOS has a delegated proof of stake model where they have 20 nodes. Ethereum, when it moves to proof of stake, is going to have, you tell me how many nodes, lots. And so I think EOS is a very interesting one. And on the DApp thing, I've talked about this before, we have a big bet on Wax. It's the intersection between gaming and crypto. There are 90 times more gamers than there are crypto people. And so it's also a really interesting on-ramp for gamers to be able to buy into crypto. So it should be synergistic both ways. I like that. I like the whole idea of gaming in crypto. I'm looking for more ideas in that space. We have a bet on a project called Cosmos, which will be, it's not a token yet, but it's a interoperability protocol. And I haven't spent a ton of time on it. I'm fascinated with this idea of how the interoperability protocols will work with these blockchains. We don't need 100 blockchains. And so how are we going to go from 100 to 5 or 3? Are they going to just die, or is there going to be? I need to find someone smart enough to explain that to me. But it's something we're looking at, we're trying to understand. I don't think anyone understands it yet. Yeah. And that's why you talk to the smart guys.
Do you have anything you want to share or anything you want to say to Korean public?
I've been treated wonderfully here, so thank you. B, I think this is a really interesting place. I had a fascinating meeting. So I think about Uber, and I always talk about this idea of a decentralized Uber. And I met the CEO of Uber. We got in an argument and didn't end well. But he was like, dude, you're theoretically maybe okay, but you're dead wrong. It's really hard to build a business, and we own those customers. And so will a decentralized Uber be able to steal Uber's customers? It's got two good reasons. It'll be cheaper and it'll be private. Is that enough? There's real stickiness in the US, game. What's fascinating about Korea, and I'm just learning this, is just met with a guy who's got a big established business, and he wants to move some to a decentralized platform. And he was like, well, because it's going to happen anyway, so I'd like to get ahead of the game. And it was in an industry that in the U.S. no one's even worried about crypto. There are companies that are doing it, but people are like, there's no way it'll get penetration. And what was interesting, I was asking him how fast the Korean consumer is to adapt. It's 4 to 5 times faster than the U.S. consumer. And so in a lot of ways, this will be a wonderful laboratory for dApps. Once there's a blockchain established for a music app or a ride-sharing app, to see if people will quickly leave the Korean version of Spotify to go to the decentralized version, or the Korean version of Uber to go to the decentralized version. I think in some ways Korea's got a better chance of succeeding than the rest of the world, and could become a leader.
Very cool. That sounds amazing. Thank you.
Thanks so much.